The Kinneret is Israel's main lake, and for a long time it's been supplying drinking water to much of the country. People got used to thinking of it as an endless source, until its level started to drop. At some point, Israel decided to do something no other country had ever done: make the sea climb uphill. Hills and tricky terrain didn't stop them. The inventive nation made the water flow upward with the help of powerful pumping stations. Nearly $300 million were spent, and a massive amount of land was dug up. All of this just to bring salty water from the Mediterranean Sea into the lake that gives Israel its drinking water. It sounds insane. But if you live in a country where every drop of water is worth its weight in gold, that kind of insanity becomes engineering. The main lake of Israel. If you look at the map of Israel, Lake Kinneret looks like a big shining mirror in the northern part of the country. But this mirror reflects not the sky, it reflects the fate of an entire nation. It's also called the Sea of Galilee, though the name is a bit misleading. The water is fresh, and it's actually quite small, only about 12 miles long and 7 miles wide. Yes, its importance is far greater than it seems. Without Kinneret, Israel wouldn't exist. Once, Kinneret was a quiet place of fishermen. They caught tilapia, watered their fields with nearby streams, and lived like that for centuries. But in the 20th century, everything changed. Israel turned Kinneret into the heart of its water system and made the water flow where it had never gone before, deep into the desert. In the 1950s and 60s, the country was growing at a crazy pace. The population kept increasing, and cities were stretching south into areas where there simply was no fresh water. That's when a plan appeared that would change Israel forever: to build a national water carrier and make life flow through pipes. Literally. It was like carving a man-made river out of stone. The Israelis dug millions of cubic feet of rock, cut through cliffs, and poured tons of concrete. The project cost 5% of the country's GDP, an insane number for those days. But there was no other choice. Eventually, pumping stations, tunnels, pipelines, and reservoirs stretched out from Kinneret's northern shore. The system extended more than 80 miles, running down the slopes of Galilee, through valleys and hills, until the water reached the country's central regions and even farther, into the dry Negev. Where there had once been only sand, the impossible began to happen. Fields and orchards turned green. When the water carrier was launched in 1964, it was a national milestone. Israel felt, for the first time, that it could control nature, that it had its own almost magical vein feeding the land. Kinneret became more than just a lake, it became the artery of the nation. Every year, about 105 billion gallons of water came from it. That's almost half of Israel's total consumption at that time. The water from Kinneret flowed through taps and homes, irrigated fields, and reached the southernmost kibbutzim. Thanks to the lake, Israel didn't just survive, it flourished. And yet, like any heart, it has its limits. The more the country took, the faster the lake was fading. There came a moment when Kinneret began to truly suffer. Lifeline is gone. In the 1960s through the 1980s, the water level in the Kinneret stayed around minus 686 to 689 feet below sea level. That was the norm everyone was fine with. Israelis pumped water for their needs without worry, and the lake naturally refilled to the proper level. But by the end of the century, droughts became more frequent and severe, and the gauge needle kept dropping lower and lower. The Kinneret was shrinking. In winter, when they usually expected a rise, there was barely any. And in summer, during the active pumping season, the level would fall by dozens of inches. In 2001, it reached the lower red line, minus 699 feet. Beyond that mark, the very processes everyone feared most began. Salt started rising from the bottom. The water turned bitter. The ecosystem began to collapse. Scientists warned another 3 feet down, and the lake that had been watering the country would turn into a salty puddle, almost a Dead Sea. Here, 0.4 inches of water equals nearly 528 million gallons. So when the level dropped even by 3 feet, Israel lost billions of gallons, enough to supply entire cities. But even then, the country couldn't give up its lifeline. There were simply no other sources. Israel kept pumping even as it watched the lake weaken. Yes, at some point, Israelis began taking less water from the Kinneret, but the lake still shrank badly during droughts. The problem wasn't only internal consumption. The main source, the Jordan River, was bringing less and less water. Its headwaters in the Golan Heights were drying up earlier each year, and the rainy season was getting shorter. In the north, in Lebanon and Syria, dams and pumping stations were built, cutting off part of the flow. The Kinneret was missing out on hundreds of millions of gallons. By 2008, the worst fear came true. The level dropped below the black line, minus 705 feet. That was a record low, when pumping stations could barely operate. The country's main artery was drying out. Boats lay stranded on the bottom, tree roots sticking out of the silt marked the new shoreline. Newspapers ran headlines like "Kinneret on the brink" and "The lake needs help." But where could they get water if the Kinneret itself had been the salvation? All around is only desert and rock, and one sea looming over the country from the west, the salty Mediterranean. Second wind. So, the Mediterranean Sea. It seems like an endless source of water. You'd think there's the solution. Just fill the lake with seawater and the problem's gone. But the lake plays by its own rules. Seawater's way too salty to be mixed with a lake that supplies drinking water to a whole country. It's like pouring brine into a bowl of spring water. It's liquid, yes, but it makes no sense. So Israel decided not to fight nature, but outsmart it. That's how, around 2018, a project was born that sounds like it defies physics: the National Carrier Flow Reversal. The same system that once pulled water from the Kinneret to the sea now works the other way around, pumping seawater uphill against gravity. The idea is simple, yet brilliant. Seawater comes in from the coast, passes through massive desalination plants, and only then gets sent inland, to the places that really need it. The most amazing thing is Israel didn't even have to build new plants. The country had long mastered the art of turning salt water into fresh water. The Ashkelon desalination plant is, in many ways, a symbol of Israel's water miracle. When it launched in 2005, the whole world was talking about how Israel managed to defeat thirst. Back then, it was the largest facility of its kind on the planet. Sitting right on the Mediterranean coast, the plant looks like an industrial city. Miles of pipes, huge reservoirs, powerful pumps, non-stop operation. It doesn't just purify water, it makes the entire national water system possible as we know it today. Every year, Ashkelon produces around 32 billion gallons of fresh water. Hard to picture, so let's put it this way. That's enough to supply a whole metropolis, or as engineers say, about a third of Israel's population in the mid-2000s. From here, water flows into the national network, distributed across cities, towns, and farming regions. Everyone, in one way or another, gets part of their water from this very plant. Then came Sorek, launched in 2013, an even more impressive part of the new system. It's a true giant, capable of producing 40 billion gallons of fresh water each year. The membranes here are the largest in the world, making the process faster and more efficient. Besides these, there are 3 more desalination plants contributing to the Kinneret's replenishment, together producing over 80 billion gallons of water per year. All desalination plants connected to the National Carrier Flow Reversal System operate on the principle of reverse osmosis. Simply put, it's standard filtration taken to perfection. The resulting water is then enriched a bit. It's too pure, too low in minerals. For normal drinking and to protect pipes from corrosion, it has to be balanced. But desalinated water doesn't flow endlessly into the Kinneret. It's also needed to meet the country's demand. Everything is carefully calculated. Israel's water authority monitors the lake's level, focusing on the red and black lines. The lower red line marks the point where the Kinneret starts suffocating. The ecosystem suffers, the shores dry up, and algae take over. If the level drops below that mark and the rainy season turns out weak, the reverse system is activated, desalinated water starts being pumped into the Kinneret, and all water extraction from it stops. But desalinated water still has to travel uphill, and that couldn't be done without the old water network. Israel became the first country on Earth to make seawater climb a mountain in order to save its natural lake. Once the Kinneret supplied water to the nation, but now the nation gives water back to the Kinneret. Life-saving arteries. To make the water flow the other way, the country had to literally rebuild itself. Old pipes, pumping stations, filters, everything that had been pushing water downhill for decades now had to lift it uphill. The old pumps couldn't handle the pressure, the pipes were too narrow, and the stations were designed for the opposite flow, so engineers from Kinneret began reassembling Israel's water system like a giant construction set. The project cost nearly $1 billion shekels, about $274 million. For that money, the country built something it had never had before, a real water elevator. A new pipeline now runs from the Mediterranean coast, roughly 18 miles through valleys and hills, all the way to the Galilee. The terrain is challenging. Rocks, steep drops, scorching heat, but the pipe can't stop. On the map, it stretches from the coast northward, passing under olive groves and between hills where there had never been roads. It ends at the Desalmon Reservoir. It became the final point where desalinated Mediterranean water takes a short pause before entering the Kinneret. Here, the pressure's balanced, the flow stabilizes, and control systems check water quality. All this ensures that the supply to the lake goes exactly on schedule, without jolts or surges that could disrupt its balance. The reservoir itself looks like a calm mirror among the hills of Lower Galilee, but inside, it's the heart of the entire new system. From here, engineers can manage supply volumes, redirect flows to different sections of the network, and adjust pressure according to the season. Together with the pumping station, it completes a closed loop that, for the first time in Israel's history, lets water flow in reverse, not from the Kinneret to the coast, but back toward the lake itself, the country's source. One of the most striking parts of the new infrastructure is the giant 5.4-foot wide pipeline laid parallel to the old national water carrier. This artery literally flips history. Now the water runs in the opposite direction. As the project advanced, dozens of miles of new connections were installed, old sections were reinforced, valves replaced, and substations upgraded. Some parts had to be literally cut into living landscapes. A new pumping station was also built near Ein Zurim. It provides the main water lift. Several smaller ones are scattered along the route, forming a cascade that lets the water rise gradually without overloads. By the end of 2022, after almost 5 years of work, the project was completed. Now, whenever the level of the Kinneret begins to drop, all it takes is a command from the Water Resources Control Center to start the pumps, and purified, fresh Mediterranean water begins its journey toward the lake. By 2023, Israel became the first country in the world to use seawater to maintain and save its natural freshwater lake. During the autumn and winter, when water levels usually fall, the Kinneret receives up to 1.3 million gallons per hour of Mediterranean water. The Israelis achieved something no one else has done before. Yet the rescue of the Kinneret isn't just the result of this new system. Israel is a country that has mastered the art of living with water scarcity, and sometimes their ways of saving water might seem unusual to others. Any water matters. In Israel, they're saving Lake Kinneret not only by desalinating seawater, but also by learning how to reuse water, literally bringing it back to life. Every gallon that gets treated and returned to the system is a gallon that doesn't have to be taken from the country's most important lake. Today, Israel recycles about 90% of its wastewater. That's a world record. For comparison, the average in European countries is around 30%, and in the US, it's under 10%. Almost all of that treated water goes to agriculture, to fields, orchards, and vineyards. What once was sewage now irrigates wheat, citrus trees, and even flowers growing in the desert. And all this is possible thanks to a massive engineering system that rivals the national water carrier in scale. At the heart of this system is the Shafton Treatment Plant, located between Tel Aviv and Rishon LeZion. It's been operating since the early 1980s and is now considered one of the most advanced in the world. Its job is to process wastewater from the country's largest urban area, home to more than 2 million people. Every day, about 98 million gallons of wastewater arrive here and go through several stages of purification: mechanical, biological, and sand and soil filtration. After that, the water becomes clean enough to be safely used for irrigation without harming soil or crops. But Shafton isn't just a treatment plant, it's a whole ecosystem where water undergoes natural purification through sandy layers near Rehovot and Nes Ziona. There, it's filtered once again underground, as if returning to nature to become life-giving water anew. Then pumps lift it back up, sending it into irrigation channels that stretch south toward the Negev fields. Thanks to this project, Israeli agriculture receives about 37 billion gallons of purified water every year, meaning it needs far less fresh water from Lake Kinneret. Besides Shafton, the country has more than 150 treatment facilities, from large ones in Haifa and Jerusalem to smaller rural complexes. They're all connected in one system managed by the National Water Authority. Modern plants are equipped with quality control systems and labs that test the water daily by dozens of parameters. In Israel, they like to say, "We don't have wastewater, we have reused water." This technology has freed up huge volumes of fresh water, eased the strain on Lake Kinneret, and stabilized the country's water balance. Even with this, the country would not be as successful in terms of water conservation. There are other equally important ways to conserve this vital resource. The unique philosophy of Israel. In Israel, saving water isn't just a habit, it's a philosophy rooted in the very existence of the country. Here, every drop is like a coin in the family budget. Israel lives in the desert, and that's why it learned to see water as the most precious thing it has. It's not some lofty statements, it's pure math. Little rain, few sources, but increasingly more people. And under these conditions, water isn't something you just extract, it's something you preserve. The true wonder of Israel's water system is how little of it gets lost. Water losses in the pipelines here are incredibly low, around 5%, at most 10% in some areas. For comparison, the global average is 20 to 30%. In Israel, every pipe is monitored, every leak is tracked in real time. Pressure sensors, electronic valves, instant alerts, all this isn't a luxury, it's part of everyday routine. If water disappears somewhere in the network, they know about it within minutes. And not because they fear losses, but because water here is treated like a living system that must be kept under control, like an organism. But the real philosophy of saving water isn't born in the pipes, it's born on the land. Israeli agriculture is proof that you can grow crops in places where it rains only a couple of times a year. Here, water doesn't flow in streams, it drips. It was in Israel in the mid-20th century that drip irrigation was invented, a simple but revolutionary idea where water goes straight to the roots, slowly, drop by drop, with no evaporation or waste. This technology, developed commercially by the company Netafim, changed agriculture worldwide. Today it's used from Spain to India. But in Israel, it became a symbol of common sense. Water the plants, not the fields. Over time, drip irrigation got smart. Farms now use sensors that track soil moisture and air temperature. Some companies have made irrigation ultra-precise. Their systems analyze data from satellites, sensors, even from the plants themselves. When the roots need more moisture, the system sends a signal and opens a valve for exactly as long as needed, not a drop more. Sometimes the farmer doesn't even get involved. Algorithms manage everything automatically. Thanks to such precision, water use drops by dozens of %. And it's all built on a simple idea. Just smart water that knows where to go. Even at home, people install systems for reusing water. For example, the water from the shower or washing machine is used to water the garden. In schools, children are taught to turn off the tap while brushing their teeth. It doesn't look like obsessive frugality, it's part of the culture. People here say, we don't save water, we help it live longer. And maybe that's the real Israeli miracle. Not desalination or pipelines, but attitude. In a country where huge parts are desert and the rest is almost desert, people have learned not to wait for rain, but to create their own water cycle. Every drop here isn't just a resource, it's part of life. And maybe that's why Israel became the country where water doesn't disappear. Who knows, maybe soon another revolutionary water-saving technology will appear in Israel. After all, that's where drip irrigation once appeared. Just take a look at the country's agriculture. In Israel, any technology in this field is revolutionary. Robots to guard the crops. In Israel, bees are becoming fewer, yet the amount of work they have to do keeps growing. Orchards and plantations are expanding, crops demand precision and consistency, but natural pollinators can't keep up. The climate adds fuel to the fire, heat, dry winds, sudden cold snaps. All this throws bees off their usual rhythm, and without their labor, there would be no avocados, no blueberries, no many other crops. But bees aren't universal workers either. They don't understand some plants very well, like avocados, with flowers that open at different times of day and require strict cross-pollination. Bumblebees, which handle this better, are rare in Israel, and their numbers are dropping too. As a result, farmers found themselves in a strange position. Technology has advanced tremendously, yet pollination still depended on random insects and the weather. With this in mind, the Israeli startup Bloomex decided it was time to replace the buzz of nature with smart machines. Their pollination robots don't fly like drones, they drive and work instead of bees. The Yahav 2400 looks like a compact platform moving along avocado rows, knowing exactly where and when to act. Instead of wings, it has electrostatic tentacles. They create a soft electric field, literally attracting pollen from the flowers and transferring it to neighboring trees. Everything happens without jerks or damage, smoothly, precisely, and quickly. The robot's connected to a system that analyzes weather, humidity, and blooming phases, so it goes out into the field only when plants are ready to receive the pollen. One pass of the Yahav 2400 can replace the labor of an entire bee colony, and it does it around the clock with mathematical precision. At the same time, the Yahav 2400 doesn't just drive through the orchard blindly. It sees the trees, using cameras and sensors to track which flowers have already been treated and which are just opening. Every movement is recorded in the system, and the farmer receives a digital pollination map where, when, and how much pollen was transferred. This precision turns a process that once depended on weather and insects into a controllable technology. The Yahav 2400 doesn't replace bees, it backs them up, working where nature starts to fall behind. Essentially, it does what farmers have dreamed of for decades. It turns the chaos of blooming into a smooth, predictable system. Not far from there, in Israel's fruit orchards, farmers face another problem. Orchards are beautiful, but they require hard work. Apples rot, peaches and avocados over-ripen within days, and labor is increasingly scarce. In Israel, as everywhere else, harvesting is one of the most labor-intensive and unpredictable jobs. During the hot season, there simply aren't enough workers, and fruit doesn't wait. That's where machines come in, capable of doing what was once considered purely human work, gently picking fruit from branches. The Israeli company Tevel Aerobotics Technologies has developed perhaps one of the most impressive agricultural technologies in recent years. These aren't just drones, but a well-coordinated team of autonomous flying pickers connected by cables to a ground platform. This module serves as both their power source and brain center. The drones rise up to the tree canopies, scan them with cameras and sensors, and the built-in AI analyzes each apple, whether it's ripe, the right size, and worth picking. Once the decision is made, the drone carefully approaches and, using a vacuum or soft gripper, removes the fruit without damaging the skin or the leaves. Then the robot gently places it in a container on the platform and immediately moves on to the next one. The machines work almost non-stop, day and night, never complain about the heat, never get tired, and never need lunch. These drones have already been tested in Chile, where Tevel Aerobotics Technologies partnered with the Unifruti Group. There, the machines harvested apples from trees, showing accuracy and speed comparable to experienced pickers. The system's now being adapted for different crops: peaches, nectarines, plums, pears, and citrus fruits. What's really useful is that the smart drones not only pick the fruit, but also create a detailed map of the orchard, allowing farmers to see every tree almost from the inside. What about vegetables? Israel has something for that too. Here the human factor kicks in again, something everyone would gladly replace. In greenhouses, life goes on around the clock. Humidity, heat, dense rows of tomatoes, all of it demands precision and care. Harvesting here is like performing surgery. You need to cut the fruit without damaging its neighbors and without mixing up ripe ones with green ones. Usually, people handle this task, but even the most experienced pickers get tired and make mistakes. The Israeli company Meadow-Motion decided it's time to hand over greenhouses to robots and created Grow, an autonomous assistant that moves between rows like a worker who never needs rest. Grow is a mobile wheeled platform with 2 arms equipped with cameras and a 3D vision system. The robot sees every plant, assesses its condition, recognizes ripe fruits by color and size, and carefully cuts them. Then it gently places the harvest in a container. No dents, no scratches. Artificial intelligence helps it handle tricky situations like tangled branches or tomatoes hidden behind leaves. But harvesting isn't all it can do. Grow also takes care of other routine tasks like pruning, thinning, and plant maintenance. According to the developers, this machine reduces the need for manual labor by up to 90% and cuts greenhouse production costs in half, turning the greenhouse into an almost fully automated ecosystem. In short, Israel knows how to make the most of what it has, which is why many believe that one day, even saving water and refilling Lake Kinneret will be the job of robots.